Well, in our previous class, we had read from Sri Aurobindo an explanation regarding the opening of the psychic consciousness or the psychic contact, which would open us not only to a consciousness beyond the mind, but also it has a very direct effect on our senses too. That is, we begin to respond with our subtle senses, if we can say that. So with this impact of the psychic being on the outer physical is what we are reading in Ashwapati here. But talking about Ashwapati, I came across an article by George Breckham. He had written it almost 10 years back, I think. The article is Sri Aurobindo and Ashwapati. It has a very fine argument there. It says, if we have noted in Savitri, the name Ashwapati does not come until page 341 of the SABCL, volume 28. That means in the beginning, that is book 3, canto 4. And all the time we are referring all these experiences to Ashwapati. But strangely enough, and George was right in his research, because I verified. Strangely enough, he says Sri Aurobindo does not mention the name of Ashwapati till page 341, book 3, canto 4. And all along, all this book 1, canto 3, the yoga of the rishi, the yoga of the king, all that is supposedly that of Ashwapati. But George very rightly argues that all these experiences that we see here about the psychicization, about his subtle physical, and about what he calls him, or the protagonist of the mysterious play, a colonist from immortality, and all that. I mean, we have seen a great amount of things about Ashwapati. They cannot be referring to the Ashwapati of the story. Because one thing is that the tapasya that Ashwapati had done for 18 long years are not the tapasya that one does in integral yoga. What Ashwapati had done was a yoga of the olden times, where there was more an emphasis on the soul's release and mukti and all that. So George argues that evidently this yoga is not the one that was done by Aurobindo, and therefore it is typically and fully integral yoga done by Sri Aurobindo himself. That's why right from the beginning I have been bringing to you Sri Aurobindo's own experiences that have been given in his sonnets, in his other poems, in the synthesis and everywhere. There's a tremendous parallelism between his sonnets, his synthesis, his life divine, his letters of yoga, and Savitri, and of course the record of yoga and Savitri. So when I read George's article, I fully agreed with him. I said, yes, it's true that we give it the name of Ashwapati, although constantly we should have been telling Sri Aurobindo's senses opened up, Sri Aurobindo's subtle physical opened up, Sri Aurobindo's psychic being opened up. And very interestingly, it was on Book 3, Canto 4, which is the vision and the boon. Almost at the end of this canto comes in the name of Ashwapati for the first time in Savitri, after a whole description of a whole writing of about 340 pages of Savitri, which is almost a midway, comes the name of Savitri. And that too, when does it come? When the Divine Mother is telling him about the new creation. And Ashwapati says, look, I cannot go back to humanity. What I see about the suffering of humanity, how can I keep silent about it? So I implore you, O Divine Mother, to come down, incarnate upon the earth. So it's at this juncture that when the Divine Mother says, okay, I will come down. So it's a very important place where Ashwapati's name has been uttered for the first time. And then I asked myself, would the original Ashwapati of the story, did he have the vision of the supermind? Obviously not. So why did Sri Aurobindo bring in Ashwapati even at that level of the new creation? I mean, a poet and an author who, as we see according to Nirod Baran's record, that how many times he changed the lines, even commas and full stops, he says, the punctuation also Sri Aurobindo would change. And especially the first 3 books were more or less directly written by him. So he had all the time to go back and refer and correct and all that. So what Nirodha tells us is, it is not just an oversight that Ashwapati's name is not mentioned. Obviously the poet was extremely conscious why he has brought him. So I really looked into that and I argued and I said, yes, even at this stage, why was Ashwapati's name brought in? Well, if you see that in your books, I don't have my book here, it is more to catch up with the story element that comes in book 4. This is book 3, Canto 4. But after that, the story element comes in. So Sri Aurobindo had to keep to the story and the symbolism. So it is not again actually when Ashwapati responds to the Divine Mother and asks for the new creation or for the incarnation, it's still Sri Aurobindo himself. But that was perhaps the best point to insert Ashwapati so that the storyline could continue. And yet we should understand there's hardly the real Ashwapati, the Ashwapati of story, until we come to Savitri, the daughter who comes in to say, I would like to marry Satyavan. So until the story element, all that goes in the name of Ashwapati, the yoga of Ashwapati, is none but Sri Aurobindo himself. So, what we started off, if you remember in our initial talks, we have always said that this is the yoga of Sri Aurobindo, and that is why, that's one of the reasons why I chose this topic as integral yoga in Savitri. because the whole of Ashwapati is nothing but Sri Aurobindo's own integral yoga. Having said that, I will resume with this reading. Yeah, this essay that I'm referring to by George Breckham is also there in this latest book of George, The New Spirituality. Maybe the copy is available now in Purtus, and you can read this article. It's a very good article, it's a very good, very well argued, and that supports what I've been doing all these months in vis-a-vis my own theme. Now, coming back to this text reading, we have just finished about the senses, and today we will take up again a completely new explanation and a new symbolism that comes in. Out of a covered tract of slumber self, the voice came of a truth submerged, unknown, that flows beneath the cosmic surfaces, only mid an omniscient silent herd, held by intuitive heart and secret sense. It caught the burden of secrecies, sealed and dumb. It voiced the unfulfilled demand of earth and the song of promise of unrealized heavens, and all that hides in an omnipotent sleep. See, as you must have seen, I get caught by some important phrases and important words, and that takes me into the deeper meaning of some of these verses. You see here, out of a covered tract of slumber self. Now the question is, how can the self be in a slumber? So you may say it's okay, it's a slumber self, it's the inconscient or the subconscient, and pass on with that. And then resonating the slumber self, you have the omnipotent sleep after a couple of lines. So I stopped short at that and I said, what is this omnipotent sleep? And what is this slumber self? And we have mentioned umpteen times that there is in Savitri a great amount of imagery from the Vedas and the Upanishads. Of course, if Vladimir were here, he would have elaborated on that. For those who do not know much of Upanishads and the Vedas, we may not recognize perhaps the amount of Vedic imagery and Upanishadic meaning and philosophy that's reflected in Savitri. In fact, in the initial classes we said about the philosophy of Savitri, majorly it is the philosophy of the Upanishads and of course the Vedas. So we had some discussions with Vladimir, and he has done a good bit of study. Initially I was not very much agreeable with Vladimir, but then when I started looking back into Savitri and seeing the images, yes, we recognize a lot of Upanishads. Now coming back to this, out of a covered tract of slumbering self, the voice came of a truth submerged, unknown, and all that hides in an omnipotent sleep. Well, as I said, it is Sri Aurobindo who explains himself. But yeah, it's the mother who takes us to this explanation, so I am always grateful to her that she opens for me some of these explanations. There is in SABCL volume 12, or I don't know because I don't know the collected works, I don't have them with me. But whatever it is, if you see the book on the Upanishads, here in SABCL it is volume 12, there is an Upanishad called the Mandukya Upanishad. And that's one of the central Upanishads apart from the Isha. Central in the sense is highly philosophic, highly Vedantic, and Indian philosophy. And in fact, here you will see a beautiful combination of what we in modern times call psychology and philosophy. Because in those ancient times there was no division between psychology and spirituality and philosophy. Because you see, they had a singular experience, which we today say, oh, this is psychology, this is philosophy, this is this, this is that. We have divided. So let me read out a couple of verses. I mean, there are 12 of them. Well, unfortunately, my Sanskrit is next to nil, so I will not be able to read the Sanskrit verses. I'll read out the English translations by Aurobindo. And here I'll highlight when it comes to the slumbering self and the omnipotent sleep. Om is this imperishable word. Om is the universe. And this is the exposition of Om. The past, the present, and the future. All that was, all that is, all that will be, is Om. Likewise, all else that may exist beyond the bounds of time, that too is Om. All this universe is the eternal Brahman. This self is the eternal, and the self is fourfold. Now this is the basic idea. How Brahman is described as a fourfold aspect. So it's interesting to see what are the four levels of Brahman. Like as we see in Sri Aurobindo, the triple status of Brahman, the transcendent, the universal and the individual. How did Vedanta, they give us the fourfold aspect of the Brahman. He whose place is the wakefulness, who is wise of the outward, who has 7 limbs, to whom there are 19 doors, who feels and enjoys gross objects, Vaishvanara, the universal male, he is the first. Just let me read through and then I'll come back to the explanation. This is the first, is called the Vaishvanara, or we have another word also called Virat. Next, he whose place is the dream, who is wise of the inward, who has 7 limbs, to whom there are 19 doors, who feels and enjoys subtle objects, Tejasa, the inhabitant in luminous mind, he is the second. So, to get back to the meaning, first of all, I'll read out from Sri Aurobindo, as I said, his own explanation. First of all is the Virat Purusha, as we say, that is the external world. That means Brahman manifests as this external outer material world. He is known as the Virat Purusha or the Vaishvanara. That is one aspect. And of course, Sri Aurobindo himself gives a word here, who feels and enjoys gross objects. That means this is the gross world. And which we think it to be the finale, the whole thing about Brahman, but this is only one stage, one level. Next is the world of the subtle objects, what we call in our Sri Aurobindonian language the subtle physical, subtle world. So that is the Tejasa, or we have also another word in the Upanishads called the Hiranyagarbha, the golden embryo, the golden womb. So we have double terms. We have Tejasa or Hiranyagarbha, Vaishvanara or Virata. When one sleeps and yearns not with any desire nor sees any dream, that is the perfect slumber. And you see the same word comes in Savitri, the slumber self. So this slumber self is the third description in the Vedanta. So where it says, when one sleeps and yearns not with any desire, nor sees any dream, that is the perfect slumber. He whose place is the perfect slumber, who is become oneness, who is wisdom gathered into itself, who is made of mere delight, who enjoys delight unrelated, to whom conscious mind is the door, Prajna, the Lord of wisdom, he is the third. So the third level is called Prajna, the wise one, the Lord of wisdom. And he is described as perfect slumber, but it's not the slumber that we speak of sleep and all that. I will explain that, but I just brought out the same word that comes in Savitri, the slumber self and the perfect slumber of the Upanishad. This is the Almighty, this is the Omniscient, this is the inner soul, this is the womb of the universe, this is the birth and destruction of creatures. He who is neither inward wise nor outward wise, nor both inward and outward wise, nor wisdom self-gathered, nor possessed of wisdom, nor unpossessed of wisdom, he who is unseen and incommunicable, unseizable, featureless, unthinkable and unnameable, whose essentiality is awareness of the self in its single existence, in whom all phenomena dissolve, who is calm, who is good, who is the one than whom there is no other, him they deem the fourth. He is the self, he is the object of knowledge. Well, that fourth level is called the Sushupti, S-U-S-H-U-P-T-I. The fourth is called the Sushupti. And that Sushupti is what we call here the omnipotent sleep. Or Sri Aurobindo describes here the omnipotent sleep. So we see here Sri Aurobindo using directly the symbolism of the Vedanta, that of Prajna and Sushupti. So we have the four levels, Virata, the gross physical. We have the Hiranyagarbha or Tejasa, the subtle physical. We have the Prajna, that is the levels beyond the mind. And we have Sushupti, which is, as he calls it, the omnipotent sleep. I was looking for a volume in our library, I couldn't get it unfortunately. Volume number 24, SABCL. You will see a beautiful letter from Sri Aurobindo, which I hope I remember to bring next time, where he is explaining the difference between Sushupti and Supermind. So somebody had said about Supermind, and then he says, no, you are confusing between the Supermind and Sushupti. So I'll bring that letter, but I hope I remember to do that. So these are the four levels. And beyond the Sushupti is the Supermind. You see, that is the gradation we get. So Sri Aurobindo goes beyond the descriptions given by the Upanishads themselves when it comes to the description of Supermind. And then he says, now this is the self. As to the imperishable word is Om, and as to the letters, his parts are the letters and the letters are his parts, namely A, U, Ma. As all of you know by now, we have Om consists of three sounds, A, U, Ma. So when we say this together, we don't say Om is not a O, although we write O and M, but when you utter it, it must be it's a very deep sound from the middle of your chest. It comes from the depth, it becomes and U and Ma. So that transition makes it the O. We don't say Om like a O, like on. on the table. It's not that on is not Om. It is Om. So, now that Om, is what? The waker, Vaishvanara, the universal male, he is the first letter. Because of initiality and pervasiveness. He that knows him for such pervades and attains all his desires. He becomes the source and first. The dreamer, Tejasa, the inhabitant in luminous mind, he is U. The second letter. Because of advance and centrality, he that knows him for such advances the bounds of his knowledge and rises above difference. Nor of his seed is any born that knows not the eternal. So it's very easy to understand now. The waker or the external is A. The dreamer, the Tejasa or the luminous mind is the U. And then the sleeper, the slumbering self, as we said, the slumber self, the Prajna. The sleeper, Prajna, the Lord of wisdom, he is Ma. The third letter, because of measure and finality. He that knows him for such measures with himself the universe and becomes the departure into the eternal. Well, when I read these Upanishads, I've read it before, but especially in connection with Savitri. I think there's a right process I'm doing. Having read Aurobindo, if you go to Upanishads, you'll understand it better. Of course, in my student days, I read the Upanishads and the Vedas and on the Veda, etc. But now, I feel like going back to this Upanishads because now is much easier, having read Aurobindo. Now, for example, here, this one, the sleeper, Prajna, the Lord of wisdom, he is Ma. The third letter, because of measure and finality. This I've explained before. Ma is to measure. So when we say Mata or Matri, or you have Matri Mandir, you have then the famous word Maya. So all that begins with Ma, be it Maya or Matri Mandir, whatever you want to call it. Ma is to measure and finality. The root word Ma itself is to measure. That means, we have seen in our previous class when we were dealing with the mother, that how the word Matri itself means one who has measured out this universe from the Supreme Satchidananda. That means what we said, he uses the word creatrix, mediatrix, is kind of, in our normal terms, like the midwife, who brings forth the baby, the creation, from the womb of Satchidananda. But one who measures out, you see, when we measure things, we have to take exactly as much as is required and needed. So that is the function of Ma. And here we see, when we say Om, we are we are imbibing that consciousness of Ma. He that knows him for such measures with himself the universe and becomes the departure into the eternal. So you see the extraordinary vibration, what we, last time I explained to you about this vibration and Om. So even, all of you know when Matri Mandir was given its foundation stone, the mother writes Om. For the first time when I saw it, I saw the stone myself there and I touched it and I bowed down to that. That a creation of the future, Matri Mandir, is founded on Om itself. So, as Mother puts it, Om is the signature of the Lord. And then, of course, I didn't remember it then, I remember it now. So she wrote Om and then she signed it on the granite stone, and that's the foundation of Matri Mandir. So that really for us it was a very sacred moment to see that the foundation of the future spirituality is but based on the ancient most thought, ancient most vibration. That means the mother herself concedes to this concept, to this vibration of Om. So we had that, and now letterless is the fourth, the incommunicable, the end of phenomena, the good, the one than whom there is no other. Thus is Om. He that knows is the self and enters by his self into the self. He that knows, he that knows. It's a beautiful ending. Ya evam Veda, ya evam Veda. He that knows, he that knows. I mean, almost I feel you don't have to know any mantra. You just utter Om, and of course you have been in India to know enough. That in everything, every puja it begins with an Om. Om Shanti, Om Ganeshaya, Om Aurobindo. Everything begins with an Om because it's so auspicious. Now, coming back to a philosophy, yes, this is where, as I said, the slumbering self is referring to in Aurobindo. And of course, I will not read out, I would like to go forward for another explanation. But in the same volume of volume 12, please read page 10 and 11, where he is describing in greater detail this fourfold aspect of Brahman, the Virata Purusha, the Swapna, the Prajna, and of course the Sushupti order. So, it's more or less, I've explained that, but you can read it for yourself. That's volume 12, page 10 and 11. Now, you see, we have seen the senses responding, the subtle world, and now he is also responding to this levels of different consciousness of Brahman. The voice came of a truth submerged, unknown, that flows beneath the cosmic surfaces. Now this is still, he hears this voice of a truth submerged. What is this truth submerged? And it says in the next word, unknown. That means it is still now a truth that is not yet known to humanity. And obviously, this must be Sri Aurobindo. It cannot be Ashtrapati. Because this truth submerged and not yet known is the truth of the supermind, the truth of tomorrow. But yet he hears from far the voices. There's a kind of a vibration that comes, that flows beneath the cosmic surfaces. And yes, it is supermind that is beneath this creation of matter. As we said earlier, that's what Sri Aurobindo calls supermind the truth idea, I capital. So it is this idea which is there behind every form. That is how he explains how from a mango seed the mango tree comes up. See, because the idea of the mango tree is there embedded in the seed. And it is this idea which flowers, which takes up a form. So we have that. Only mid an omniscient silence heard, held by intuitive heart and secret sense. I take the next line. In the unceasing drama carried by time, on its long listening flood that bears the world's insoluble doubt on a pilgrimage without goal, a laughter of sleepless pleasure foamed and spumed, and murmurings of desire that cannot die. A cry came of the world's delight to be, the grandeur and greatness of its will to live, recall of the soul's adventure into space. A traveller through the magic centuries and beings labor in matter's universe, its search for the mystic meaning of its birth and joy of high spiritual response, its throb of satisfaction and content in all the sweetness of the gifts of life, its large breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear, its taste of pangs and tears and ecstasy, its rapture's poignant beat of sudden bliss, the sob of its passion and unending pain. See here, it says there's such different images. Each of these lines is as we see in Utaben's paintings, it's a different painting, is a different scene that has been depicted by the poet. So we have left that slumbering self and the omnipotent sleep, and now he comes to a different imagery. He says, he, that means the king or Dashrapati or Aurobindo, in the unceasing drama carried by time on its long listening flood that bears the words insoluble doubt on pilgrimage without goal. You see, when I was reading this question of insoluble doubt, I came across a conversation by the mother in the agenda, where she explains about doubt. She says doubt by its very nature is repetitive, persistent. You must have experienced this. When there is a doubt, it repeats itself for no reason, even if you give it an answer, if you give it a convincing reply. But the doubt is never satisfied. It will come back, Because that is the nature of doubt, it is repetitive. That's why Aurobindo uses the word insoluble doubt on a pilgrimage without goal. I mean, because it has no goal, it exists for the sake of existing. Not really clarifies things and all that. It just, it keeps on bothering you. And murmurings of desire that cannot die, of course, that we all know, the desire that cannot die. A cry came of the world's delight to be. Of course, those of you who have read the Life Divine, the delight of existence, you will see the meaning of this world's delight to be. I mean, the world, material world, asserts itself and says, I want to express the divine beauty. So this self-exertion is there, the grandeur and greatness of its will to live, recall of the soul's adventure into space. Now from this, there's a very specific image, soul's adventure into space. What is the soul's adventure into space? It is nothing but the birth of the psychic being upon earth. So there's a recall, there is a kind of a refreshing of your memory of the soul's adventure into space. That means soul has come onto earth, a traveler through magic centuries and beings labor in matter's universe. So it's the soul or the psychic being which has taken innumerable births. For centuries and centuries it has lasted upon earth. It has taken new forms, lasted a while, taken new forms, lasted a while. So that is the traveler. The soul is the traveler through the magic centuries and beings labor in matter's universe. Its search for the mystic meaning of its birth and joy of high spiritual response. So why is the word search? What's the meaning of this word search? For the mystic meaning of its birth. You see, when the soul, as we all have been told, takes birth for a specific purpose. But then, once it is born, once it takes a body, it is as if it has forgotten the purpose of its birth. So this whole question of education, this whole question of upbringing, this whole question of growing up, is nothing but the soul trying to remember, recollect why it has come, what is its experience, or what ought to be its experience in this body. So this is where it takes time. Some people realize it early, some people take time, and some people take to the end of their life. But all this depends upon the circumstances. That's where the mother insists upon the right education, and that's what is the central purpose of integral education, to help the psychic being to recollect the purpose of its birth. That's why the entire insistence of integral education is upon the soul. So mother does say education of the mental, education of the vital, education of the physical, etc. But these are education of the instruments only. But all this education must help the soul to recollect the purpose of its birth. So that is why we see here that it searched for the mystic meaning of its birth, and joy of high spiritual response is throb of satisfaction and content in all the sweetness of the gifts of life. Now this is something very interesting. Here it refers directly to the psychic being. Now what is the psychic being doing through all these experiences? It has in all the sweetness of gifts of life, that means all that we are undergoing on a day-to-day basis. What are the gifts of life? It's large breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear. We have all kinds of experiences of hope and thrill and fear and of love and all that. And even its taste of pangs and tears and ecstasy, its rapture's poignant beat of sudden bliss, the sob of its passion and unending pain. Now that's a line that I needed to look up a bit. Because yes, I can a little bit understand how the psychic being is absorbing, affected by the pangs and tears and ecstasy. But why should the psychic being go through the sob of its passion and unending pain? That means even in life, when we have this experiences, does the psychic being suffer? Because there was an incident when the mother said, the soul does not suffer. There was some drama or something, and somebody had written the soul suffering or something, and then mother says, no, the soul doesn't suffer. So don't put this board on the stage. So she got it removed. So she did not accept the phrase soul suffering. But yet I find here that as a psychic being, it is, what is it? Of course, Aurobindo mentions it doesn't bring in the word psychic being, but it's obviously, philosophically, it is the psychic being, because the psychic being that goes through the meaning of its birth. And then in all the sweetness of the gifts of life, its large breath and pulse and thrill of hope and fear, etc. So I was trying to see what exactly the psychic being absorbs. I mean, is it true that the psychic being goes through pain, but the soul does not go through pain as a mother? Because I had to kind of try to reconcile what the mother said and what Aurobindo is writing here. And then I went back to my Bible, the Life Divine, and here I find a meaning. And this is the explanation of what the mother said and what Aurobindo is writing here. So if we want to understand this, we must make a distinction between the soul and the psychic being. And I'm sure you know by now the distinction, but just for the sake of the reference. It's a psychic being that goes through these innumerable births. It's a psychic being that grows. It's a psychic being that absorbs. It's a psychic being that participates in life. So if there is a sadness, if there is pain in the outer being, the soul does reflect. But it doesn't touch the psychic being does reflect. It doesn't touch the soul. Whereas we have seen, If the psychic being is here in front, is there, is behind the psychic being is the soul. So it's a layer behind, because that soul, that Atman, is the permanent reflection of the Paramatman, that is of the Brahman. So there is a reflection of the Brahman in the self or the soul or the Atman, but it is a kind of a permanent feature. But the psychic being which goes through this birth and birth. So the psychic being also must participate in the day-to-day experiences. Otherwise, if the psychic being also is unaffected, then there's no meaning in what we are doing outwardly. So why is it that we ought to take to sadhana? Why is it that we ought to take to purification? Why is it that we have to do aspiration, etc.? Because these are all going to reflect on the psychic being and help in its growth. So here we see Aurobindo, that is SABCL volume 18 and page 404 to 405. I'll read a paragraph which I think you can understand, but let me read it out. As with the cause, the ignorance, so is it with the consequences of the ignorance. The chapter is called The Divine and the Undivine. All this that seems to us incapacity, weakness, impotence, limitation of power, our will's hampered struggle and fettered labor, takes from the point of view of the divine in his self-workings the aspect of a just limitation of an omniscient power by the free will of that power itself, so that the surface energy shall be in exact correspondence with the work that it has to do, with its attempt, its allotted success, or its destined because necessary failure, with the balance of the sum of forces in which it is a part, and with the larger result of which its own results are an indivisible portion. Yeah, it's very complex. I mean, for the first time if you read, it is complex sentence. But the sum and substance is that what all we call weaknesses, impotence, limitation of power, etc., etc., are part of the self-limitation of the divine himself. It is not that the weaknesses are not caused by the divine, because we should not say all these weaknesses they may be undivine, but the source is the divine. It's the divine, that's why he says here, self-working, the aspect of a just limitation of an omniscient power by the free will of that power. You see, that's what he explains in this chapter and previous chapters, that this creation is nothing but a self-limitation of the divine. So when there is a self-limitation, there's bound to be what he calls weaknesses, impotence and all that. In fact, if you remember a chapter called Death and Desire, so death, desire and incapacity, that's a very beautiful philosophic chapter. That how is it that death comes in, how is it that there is undivine? Because of the incapacity. Because of the incapacity there is desire, and because of desire there is death. But where did this incapacity come from? It is by the free will of that supreme power which wanted to self-limit. Well, my point is not there. I'll come to what I was looking for. As to the suffering, that's what is the unending pain. My answer is here. As to the suffering, which is so great a stumbling block to our understanding of the universe, it is evidently a consequence of the limitation of consciousness, the restriction of force, which prevents us from mastering or assimilating the touch of what is to us other force. The result of this incapacity and disharmony is that the delight of the touch cannot be seized, and it affects our sense with a reaction of discomfort or pain. A defect or excess, a discord resultant in inner or outer injury, born of division between our power of being and the power of being that meets us. Well, there's a lot of explanation that needs to be done here, but I would skip it just to tell you in reference, with en passant, as we say, that the cause of pain, the cause of disharmony, the cause of suffering is, as it puts it here, is a consequence of the limitation of consciousness. Well, the delight of existence is a chapter here, chapter 5 or 6. That is, as I've always said, it's a master chapter. I mean, it really corresponds to what we have in Savitri, book 6, which explains about the pain and suffering. In the Life Divine, we have chapter 5 and 6. What is the cause of this pain and suffering? It is the limitation of consciousness. So that is why we understand why Aurobindo is telling us to enlarge our consciousness. The more we enlarge our consciousness, automatically the pain and suffering would decrease. Well, as I said, it's an extraordinary chapter, but I cannot go into that, but let me just read what he's saying here. The result of this incapacity and disharmony is that the delight of the touch cannot be seized, and it affects our sense with the reaction of discomfort or pain. Well, I still remember I had given an example here that you see, because our consciousness is so narrow and limited, when that supreme divine delight is pouring, it kind of, when it comes into this limitation, it is uncomfortable. It's like you say, you have a capacity to eat this much, but you go to a party and you really eat double the quantity. What happens? There's a tremendous discomfort in the stomach, and it starts paining because you have gone beyond the capacity of a stomach to eat. So similarly, we have pain in the physical and emotional and all these levels because our consciousness cannot bear the extent or the intensity of the delight that's all around us constantly. So if we enlarge our consciousness, our capacity to absorb the delight becomes more, and the pain becomes less, the discomfort becomes less, and that is how we start enjoying the great divine delight that is constantly around us. That's what is the sum and substance of the chapter. Now, coming further to the psychic being, he would say, behind in our self and spirit is the all delight of the universal being, which takes its account of the contact, a delight first in the enduring and then in the conquest of the suffering, and finally in its transmutation that shall come hereafter. For pain and suffering are a perverse and contrary term of the delight of existence, and they can turn into their opposite, even into the original all delight, Ananda. So because of this understanding, it is possible that pain can be transmuted into all delight. If we expand this consciousness, Mother gives an example. They would say, even if somebody were to hit you physically on your arm, you won't have pain if you have the expansion of consciousness. So because there's a fear that my arm will be injured, my bone will be broken, because of all this fear, etc., we get constricted in our consciousness, and the more you have constricted, and that is one of the primary effects of fear, that makes your consciousness so limited, constricted, that the moment things happen, it really injures you. Just to go off the track, but it's a very real experience. As all of you and most of you have heard, our Kedarnath adventure, we were in mid-June, we had been to the Yatras and Kedarnath and Badrinath, etc. And that was the time of the floods in Kedarnath, and so we were into rough weather. However, what I want to tell you is, I I was going on the pony because there was the last 14 kilometers of trekking up the mountain, and also we took the pony to come down because it's a very rough road and we couldn't last the 14 kilometers. But what happened was, at a point, because the saddle was loose on the horse, there was a jerk, the saddle loosened and it slipped, and along with the saddle I also slipped and fell on the road. But of course, I fell flat on my feet, on my back, and then my foot was stuck in the, what is that called, paddle? No, what is it called? Stirrup. But then the thing was, as I said to Deepshika, that it was all such a quiet, calm, peaceful experience. I find myself on the road, but it's a bit odd. I can see the legs of the horses around me. But the point I realized was, I was not afraid. There's no fear. As I told somebody, I had no time to be afraid, because the mind was not working, because I was really enjoying the nature's beauty and thinking of the mother and being grateful to her. So my consciousness was, in a way, as put it in the language of the life divine, a little larger at that time because of the beauty around, the river and the mountains and all that. So this thing happened physically, I felt, but there's no time to be afraid, because as I told you, the moment you are afraid, your consciousness becomes restricted, constricted, and then you have the pain, you have the fear, and you have the nervousness and all that. And at another time, the horse had to climb 3-4 steps. It was raining, profuse raining. And even the horse slipped. I say even the horse because they're not supposed to slip. The ponies are brilliant to find out every stone and they hardly ever slip. But I was sitting on the horse, and it tried to jump up the steps, but 3 or 4 times it jumped up, it fell, it slipped. But I was not watching myself, but I was so cool, as it is said. I'm not a horse rider, I'm not like Tina, and I have the confidence, doesn't matter. It's the first time almost after years together. But that's where I experienced that when you don't have fear, it was quiet, and I said, okay, it's trying to get up and slipping and all that, and I got a little disbalanced, but I didn't fall the second time. But that's when I had a positive experience that if you're not afraid, then even this so-called injuries and falling, etc., they hardly have an effect on you. This all delight is not present in the universal alone, but it is here secret in ourselves, as we discover when we go back from our outward consciousness into the self within us. So we have first talked about the all delight, the divine around us, the vastness. But then he says, no, it is also there in the secret self within us. The psychic being in us takes its account even of its most perverse or contrary, as well as its more benign experiences, and grows by the rejection of them or acceptance. That's a marvelous thing that we found here. When Aurobindo writes here about this question of the unending pain and the sob of its passion, look at this line. The psychic being in us takes its account even of its most perverse or contrary, as well as its more benign experiences, and grows by the rejection of them or acceptance. It extracts a divine meaning and use from our most poignant sufferings, difficulties, misfortunes. So that is what Aurobindo describes, the sob of its passion, the unending pain, the taste of pangs and tears and ecstasy. So everything counts into the psychic being's growth. So either it accepts or rejects, and all this, there's a meaning in the poignant suffering, difficulties, misfortunes. Nothing but this all delight could dare or bear to impose such experiences on itself or on us. Nothing else could turn them thus to its own utility and our spiritual profit. So too, nothing but an inalienable harmony of being inherent in an inalienable unity of being would throw out so many harshest apparent discords and yet force them to its purpose, so that in the end they are unable to do anything else but to serve and secure, and even themselves change into elements that constitute a growing universal rhythm and ultimate harmony. At every turn it is the divine reality which we can discover behind that which we are yet compelled by the nature of the superficial consciousness in which we dwell to call undivine, and in a sense are right in using that appellation. For these appearances are a veil over the divine perfection, a veil necessary for the present, but not at all the true and complete figure. I mean, a paragraph, but it's delightful. I mean, it gives you the whole meaning. I mean, that there is really one supreme delight. There is the outer one, there is the inner one. And it says the inner one can take up all the sufferings and all that, because it's the outer delight which is kind of manipulating what sufferings to come, what pains to come, what pleasures to come. So everything is done by nothing but an inalienable harmony of being inherent in an inalienable unity of being, would throw out so many harshest apparent discords and yet force them to its purpose. So this is the meaning of these lines here. And I'm finding it more and more interesting to read Savitri. Of course, I've done this before at Hall of Harmony, but I can assure you I never went so deep, because now I'm trying to go slow and really get to grips. So I'm really happy to discover things for myself now, and previously it was so different. So that's the experience of the psychic. And then I understood why the mother said soul does not suffer, but the psychic being can take all this suffering, because it has to confront all this. Otherwise there's an absolute division between the inner and the outer. So there's no meaning in the outer sadhana. You keep doing whatever you want and you say, my soul, my psychic doesn't get affected. No, the soul doesn't get affected. But the psychic being, because the moment we say it grows by its birth, what does it mean? That means whatever it does in this birth on the mental, physical, vital level, it affects his growth. And now I see the meaning, how this affects all this pain and joy and joy, etc. And this is again an experience that I don't know if we should anymore call this Ashwapati as Ashwapati, but I've explained it, so we can use both Ashwapati and Aurobindo. So you can see almost I would say a personal autobiographical note here. I mean, such remarkable, definite descriptions cannot be a borrowed one. It has to be an authentic, almost, authentic. But one thing is there, that I should tell you. A lot of his experiences may not have taken place while he is writing. Many of them were experienced before, in the 1910 to 1914, when there is this record of yoga. So there have been this kind of a thing Aurobindo has done. He has taken the past experiences and put them in the wider context of Savitri. But it is his own experience. So we need not think that while he was writing this book 1, canto 3, that he had the psychic experiences. It could not have been, because this was written in 1930s. But 1930s was already into the supermind. So we can understand that logical historicity, that most of these experiences were experienced when he was in his record of yoga period, and later transferred to Savitri. Because again, in the letter which I will bring next time, he says a lot of people here speak so easily about supermind, but supermind is not a thing that will come to you in the beginning. It will come much later in the sadhana, when you have had your psychic being, when you had lots and lots of these things. So when he's talking about the supermind in Savitri, he must have gone through the whole gamut of the sadhana experiences. Then only he says, you will come towards the end of your sadhana into supermind. So don't talk so loosely about supermind. He's telling the sadhaks in the ashram that who have had this experience of supermind, and they said, don't do that. First go through a lot of sadhana, and then he gives the gradations of sadhana. It's very interesting. And that is good for us because we have to see if Ashwapati or Aurobindo have gone through those gradations and in what way. Because it will help us to discover the sadhana integral yoga in Savitri itself. Well, yeah, I think